All right, ladies and gentlemen. So it is not just apparent to Americans such as yourself and myself that we need more economic stimulus. At this point, the Fed is talking about, matter of fact, they have been talking about for some time, our need for more stimulus. But what we got today from the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, the president, Charles Evans, he made a statement today. And that statement, in so many words, was that without us seeing stimulus come from the White House as well as Congress, what we are going to end up seeing is a reignition of recessionary dynamics. So, what that means is we are going to see dynamics come into play that essentially are going to lead to a recession. Some people might make the argument that we are already there. Some people I've seen online have gone so far as to describe our current state as depression level. But coming directly again from the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago President Charles Evans, at this point, what he is seeing is a situation in which we are not necessarily in the place of recession, but we will certainly continue headed towards the path of recession and the dynamics that lead to recession if we indeed don't see stimulus. And as a result of that, if you ask the question, well, gee, what's so wrong with that? You know, we've been through a recession before and we made it out okay. The problem with that is that it essentially is going to hinder our recovery. Obviously, we know what the recovery is from, just how many of us, including our president, are looking to recover from coronavirus. Our economy is also in the process of recovering from coronavirus. Some people might say it's in the process of recovering, and some people, when they look at their own personal situations, they would say they're not anywhere near recovery. But we'll just go ahead and say that we're in recovery nonetheless. So, again, on Monday, this is when we heard this information come from Charles Evans, and he said, and I'm going to quote directly. He said that another economic rescue package will play an enormously powerful role in helping struggling households and businesses make it through the coronavirus pandemic until it's under control. So he lays out very clearly why more stimulus is needed. He didn't say anything about, we want to bail out state and local governments, and he didn't say he made it about the people. He made it about the fact that not just people need money, but businesses need money. Now, you could make the argument, well, if you just kind of help businesses, it'll help people keep jobs. But it's becoming very apparent, if there's ever been a time where people have been able to clearly see the effects of kind of trickle down economics, all you have to do is look at the recent administration of the PPP program, right? We saw that obviously you had the unemployment extension that was the extended unemployment benefits that were given to unemployed individuals, that $600 per week on top of their state benefits. But you also saw, the $1,200 check that most Americans received, but those forms of stimulus ran out well before the funding for the PPP ran out. And when we were in the situation where the funding for the PPP was still in play, when those other forms of stimulus had all but depleted themselves, that was the point at which you could clearly look at and see the effects of trickle-down economics. Well, what do I mean? We had money going to businesses, and the businesses essentially didn't, in so many words, have consumers. I have seen people online make the argument that, well, obviously there were consumers because you just have to look at the stock market. The stock market has been having record highs. Well, guys, the stock market at this point is so detached from the consumer. I'd go so far as to say that the stock market is not really an accurate representation of your average everyday consumer. What we had seen, one of the main reasons why stocks were at a record high was given the bailout that the stock market received, right? given what the federal government had done in terms of the stock market. It was not a result of people going out and I saw one person saying, well, Tesla, they were doing so well, and da da da, and I don't want to go into specifics. I don't want to make this about the stock market, but again, it wasn't necessarily because everyone out there was buying a Tesla. It wasn't because everyone was out there, now in some cases you could make the case, well, you know what, I'm not going to get into that economic argument, but anywho, nonetheless, if you ever wanted to kind of see the effects of trickle-down economics, look at what we saw recently with the PPP and its administration. We recently had the time pass, which kind of the date that was set in stone for the October 1st date for businesses to essentially keep their employees on payroll. That day has come and gone. Look at the airlines, look at Walt Disney. That what happened on October 1st? Hey, we're going to have to let 20,000 people go. We're going to have to let, and it was all because, yes, the government gave them money, the government bailed them out, but it was either a situation where people either did not have the money to go and to spend, or they may have had the money, but again, dealing with the pandemic, people don't feel safe. Most people. Now, you have people out there who, don't acknowledge the reality in which we live, who think that this is nothing more than just a cold or a flu, who think that you can drink bleach and be okay, who think that, a cup of chicken noodle soup will do the body good and you'll be back to business as normal. For some people, this may be the equivalent of a cold or a flu in terms of the severity of their illness if they contract COVID-19. But this thing is killing people. This thing is highly contagious. I was reading, I found myself online. I find myself online all the time, right? And, we talk about the fact that the mortality rate with COVID-19 is approximately 1%. Let's kind of let's examine that kind of 1% and put that in perspective. If, let's say, for instance, we applied that 1% fatality rate to flights. If 1% of flights had a fatality rate every day, roughly 1,000 flights would be falling out the sky every day. 1,000 flights. How many of you would be out there riding planes like it's nothing? Now, some of you may be suicidal. I hope not. If you are, please get some help. But most people who think they have a reason to live, they would not feel comfortable. Excuse me. I did not edit that out. If you've seen the news this morning, you might kind of understand what that kind of is in reference to. The fact that I coughed and I didn't edit it out because someone coughed, but they did edit it out. I'm not going to get into that. But so anywho, let's turn back to the Fed. Sometimes I find myself kind of going off. But so guys, the gist of what Charles Evans said today is that we need not just stimulus, but he used the very word that I have been using, and that is sufficient stimulus. Again, I've used the example several times of having a house that is on fire. If we look at the two sides, the Democrats and the Republicans, and what they want to do to put out the fire that is blazing through this country, one party wants to take a bucket of water, a single bucket of water, because they want to conserve water to put out a raging fire. Okay? Now, they could just genuinely believe that that's enough water, or they could understand that it's not enough water, but they want to use the water for other stuff. Maybe they want to use water to bake their cakes. They want to use water to take their nice baths after a stressful day. I don't know. But then you have another party that sees the same fire, but they understand that a single bucket of water is not going to be sufficient enough to actually extinguish the flames, to address the problem. And this is why, again, I have said it's not just a matter of saying, well, sure, we'll throw $1 trillion at the problem. It is not sufficient. For those that I've mentioned several times, I am not by any means a Nancy Pelosi cheerleader. I have so many different disagreements with that woman on various issues. But what I am willing to do as an American, as someone who recognizes the severity of the issue that we're facing right now, I recognize that on this issue, while Nancy Pelosi, in my opinion, is wrong on many, 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 many things, it's an ever-growing list, she is not wrong on this issue of stimulus. Now, is what she proposed perfect? No. Does it have a lot of pork? No. Excuse me. Yes, a lot of pork. But what it does do is it does sufficiently meet the needs of what we need to meet. So bringing that back to Charles Evans, he said, and I quote, that we need sufficient stimulus. And that sufficient stimulus, get this, it does include support for state and local governments, because like you can't have sufficient stimulus while helping businesses and even helping people, but not helping your state and local governments. Now, do we make it a windfall for them? No. But do we also give them a nickel or a quarter and say, hey, it is what it is, do what you do? We can't do that. That's not sufficient. Not at all. So anyone who would tell you that either we don't need funding for state and local governments or they can survive on the bare minimum, they're not looking to make this sufficient. And that's what you need to question. When we hear these numbers, especially as the negotiations are taking place, and we hear, we're actually seeing the breakdowns that are supposed to be allocated towards different programs and such, ask yourself, is this sufficient? Now, I know for most of us, these numbers are so large, we can't really grasp how large the numbers are. But then on top of that, we're not really clear of, of knowing, we're not really clear on knowing if a certain amount is sufficient. What I would ask you to do, and this is kind of one of those things where, hey, don't go off of me, don't go off of politicians, go off of you and your own research. Look at these amounts that they are saying that they need. One of the great things about government programs is that you can find out about the money that they have had and that they have used. That money is that information is readily available to the general public for the most part. So if they're saying, hey, we want to allocate X amount of funding for X program X, Y, and Z, take it upon yourself to research the amount of funding that the program recently had, that state recently had, whatever the case was, and see how its performance was, either with an amount that was more than that or less, whatever that amount was. Let's say, for instance, they say, well, this is just a hypothetical situation, hypothetical, type deal. We're going to allocate, $1 million to FEMA. Go and look at the typical funding that FEMA has, whether it be, I would say, look at maybe their most recent annual for funding levels, but look at that and say, okay, well, typically they've had before, just say $3 million. They had way more than $3 million. And again, this is just a hypothetical, just for the sake of this example. They had $3 million before, and they're saying that they only want to give them $1 million. Consider that's well under what they normally would have as their operating budget, but then consider as well that in the times in which we live, their financial needs, their financial obligations are a lot higher. Simply as a matter of safety, simply as a matter of trying to keep people safe. So do the research for yourself. Don't just count on Nancy or Mitch or Mark or Steve or anybody. Or heck, don't even wait for Charles Evans to tell you these funding levels are appropriate. Research that for yourself, because that information is available. But again, point of it is, at least we have this Federal Reserve president out of Chicago stating that what we need is sufficient stimulus. That should include support for state and local governments. And essentially, he stated if we do get that, and I'm giving you the exact numbers, if we do get, and he didn't, to the best of my knowledge, he didn't say exactly what those funding levels were, but he did say if we did get sufficient funding that included funding for state and local governments, what we should get is we should get an unemployment rate that should fall from 7.9% as of last month to 4% by 2023. Now, I will tell you, and just to kind of end this here right now, I don't necessarily believe these unemployment numbers. I believe wholeheartedly with every fiber in my being, every bone in my body, that the unemployment numbers are way higher than what is being reported. All you have to do, for instance, is look at a couple of months ago where they actually changed how the unemployment numbers were calculated and who would actually be counted. And gee, what do you know? That next set of numbers that came out, dramatically lower, but nothing had changed within the economy. Benefits at that point had actually been cut, but things got better. I don't believe it. Now, again, don't take my word for it. Research it for yourself. But again, point of it is here, we do have the Fed talking about our need for more stimulus.